For 55 years, Claire believed her grandfather died in a factory fire. But when she stepped inside a sealed train car, untouched since the Cold War, she found something impossible etched into the steel wall: his handwriting. Spelling. Her name, a message from the past. In a place he was never supposed to be. What really happened in 1970? And why was the truth hidden beneath rust, lies, and silence for half a century? The Montana Northern Railway Yard had been mostly quiet since the early 2000s. Just a few tracks still in use for seasonal freight, a couple of rusting engines, and a row of decommissioned passenger cars that hadn't seen a human being in decades. Some were vandalized, some stripped for parts. Most just stood there in the valley's cold wind, relics of a time no one talked about anymore. But in early April of 2025, a private historical foundation rolled into town with a flatbed and a promise to restore 3 of the old cars for a traveling museum exhibit titled Ghosts of the Rails. It was a nostalgic project funded by grant money, volunteers, and people who just missed the sound of trains cutting through the hills at night. On their second week of work, the crew rolled one of the old cars, number MNX4017, into the service bay. It hadn't been opened since 1972. The exterior was scorched on one side, with smoke damage across the roofline and a collapsed rear platform. Records showed it had been involved in a fire while in storage. No fatalities, just a write-off. That's what the old manifest said. Anyway, no one had bothered to open the doors since until that Tuesday. The crew pried open the rusted entry with a crowbar and a grinder. The door groaned like it had lungs. A puff of black dust hit the air, and then a stench. Not rot, not mold. Just old time, trapped and sour. Inside, the windows were coated in soot, curtains burned to strips. The seating was intact but warped by heat. Everything was sealed tight with age. At the far end of the car, the emergency exit had been welded shut. Someone muttered, "Why would they seal both ends?" No one had an answer. Among the crew was a quiet 30-something woman named Claire Vance, an archivist contracted to catalog any original signage, blueprints, or vintage fixtures for museum display. She'd grown up in Great Falls, but now lived in Spokane, working in a university archive. Restoring old railway cars wasn't her usual gig, but this one caught her attention, because her grandfather, James Vance, had been a conductor on this very line before he died in a house fire in 1970. Hurley talked about him. James had been a war veteran, a rail worker, and, as far as Claire's father was concerned, a man who died too young and left too many questions. Claire only had one photo of him, black and white, taken in 1965. James stood beside train, one hand on the railing, the other holding a folded timetable. He wore a vest and tie, a pressed cap, and a grin that seemed too rare to last. Claire hadn't thought about him much over the years. But when she heard the number MNX4017, something tugged at her. She remembered seeing it scribbled on the back of that old photograph. 2 days after the crew opened the car, Claire came in alone early in the morning, flashlight in hand. The others were still unloading gear. She stepped over the rotted entry step and moved slowly toward the back. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. A plaque, maybe. A name scratched into the paint. Something. Halfway down the aisle, her light caught something odd, near the emergency exit, right where the wall met the floor, was a panel that didn't match. Not part of the original design. Wood slats covered with aged linoleum, screwed down roughly with rusted bolts. Claire knelt, the linoleum curled at the edges. Something had been etched beneath it, faint lines hard to make out. She brushed the dust away with her sleeve and leaned closer. Letters. Carved by hand, jagged, deep. JV, the 12th of March 70, not fire. Tell Claire. She froze. The flashlight dropped from her hand, bouncing once against the seat rail before rolling to a stop. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She was born in 1993. Her grandfather, James Vance, died in March of 1970. And yet, there it was, his initials. A date, a message. To her, decades before she existed. She staggered out of the train car and into the daylight, her heart thudding so loudly she couldn't hear the sounds of the yard anymore. Only her own breathing. Only the pounding confusion between her ears. Tell Claire, how could he have known her name? How could this be real? That evening, Claire sat in her hotel room with the photo of her grandfather spread on the bed. She'd brought it from Spokane, tucked in the back of her folder in case she wanted to show it to the team. She turned it over. There, in faded blue ink. MNX 4017, end of line, JV. She hadn't noticed it before. Had he been in that car the night of the fire? She thought he died at home. That's what her father always said. The obituary said, residential fire. No funeral. No body. Just the remains and a closed casket. Claire opened her laptop and searched the public death records. And then she noticed something else odd. Her grandfather's death certificate wasn't digitized. All it said was confirmed deceased. No autopsy. She called her dad that night. His voice was hesitant, worn by time and distance. Dad, she said, why didn't Grandpa have a funeral? There was a long pause. I told you, he said. There was a fire. They didn't recover much. Just a badge, a belt buckle, some bone. That's what they told us. Why? Because I found his initials carved into a train car, she said. Dated March 12, 1970, with a message. He went silent again. For too long. Dad, did he really die in a house fire? More silence. Then, I don't know, Claire. The next day, she returned to the car. This time, she brought gloves and a crowbar. She unscrewed the warped linoleum panel. It took over an hour, but underneath was a shallow compartment, maybe 10 inches deep. Inside, wrapped in dry cloth, was an old ledger book, black cover, cracked spine. Smelled of oil and age. On the first page, in careful cursive, property of James Vance. If found, give to my granddaughter. She know. Claire sat there, alone, hands shaking, and then she opened the book. The first line read, "What you were told about my death is a lie." The ledger felt fragile in Claire's hands. The leather cover had peeled in spots, and the binding was loose, but the pages inside were preserved better than she expected. Some were browned at the corners. Others were crisp, as if they'd been shielded from the worst of the fire. At the top of the second page was a date, March 10th, 1970. Below it, a sentence. I've been followed for 2 weeks. I don't know what they want, but they're not railroad men. Claire read on. Her grandfather's handwriting was steady, methodical. He wrote like a man used to keeping logs, times, routes, observations. But this wasn't about train schedules. It was a confession. They started coming around after that shipment out of Helena. I never got a manifest, just told to sign and stay quiet. Seemed wrong from the beginning. 4 crates, no sender, no label, just the initials HEM, printed on each. Claire frowned. HEM? She grabbed a notepad and began copying key details. Saw 2 men board the train near Deerfield. Dressed like inspectors, but no paperwork. Wouldn't give names. Just sat in the rear car and watched me the whole ride. I kept checking the mirror. One of them smiled too much. That kind of smile you don't forget. The next few entries became increasingly paranoid, or maybe just desperate. Got a call at home. No voice. Just static. I unplugged the phone and stayed up all night. Helen thinks I'm losing it. Maybe I am, but I know what I saw. Helen, Claire's grandmother. She died before Claire was born. I made a copy of the crate log and hid it in locker 42 at the Havermill Depot. If something happens to me, find that log. It has the real contents. Claire paused. That depot had been torn down in the 80s. Locker 42 likely gone. Still, she wrote it down. Then came the final 2 entries. They came to the house tonight. Said if I talk, my family won't. Be safe, Helen cried. I told her I'd fix it. And I'm going to seal myself in MNX 4017 tonight. They won't find me there until it's too late. If anyone reads this. My name is James Vance and I didn't burn in that house. Claire felt her hands start to tremble again. She set the ledger on her lap and leaned back against the wall of the train car. She looked around. This was where he had hidden. This was where he'd carved her name. She wasn't even alive yet. How did he know? That afternoon, Claire returned to the motel, called her father again, and asked a question she'd never thought to ask. Was Grandpa religious? There was a pause. Not particularly, her father said. Why? She flipped to the back of the ledger where a small pocket was sewn into the cover. Inside was a folded slip of paper, a prayer card. But not the kind you find in churches. It was hand-drawn. An image of a train wheel surrounded by thorns. Beneath it, in faded ink, those who move in silence are not always lost. Claire emailed scanned pages of the ledger to a professor she trusted at the university in Spokane, a folklore researcher named Dr. Irene Holloway, who had studied secret religious sects in the Northwest during the Cold War era. She called back in 3 hours. This symbol, she said, was used by a group known as the Sons of Silence. Not the biker gang. This was different. Post-World War II. Some railroad workers formed a secretive group tied to transporting classified cargo. Some say they were paid to move things the government didn't want logged. Biological samples, intelligence files, prisoners. Claire was stunned. You think my grandfather got involved? Maybe unwillingly, Holloway said. Or maybe he stumbled onto something and tried to back out. Either way, that symbol. It's a marker, a warning. Claire felt cold all over. She looked again at the etched message in the floor of the train car. Not fire. Tell Claire. The next morning, Claire drove to the old Havermill depot site that had been turned into a storage warehouse decades ago. Now half vacant and scheduled for demolition later that year. She sweet-talked the maintenance man into letting her in. She claimed to be researching old railway blueprints for the museum. The place still smelled like dust and diesel. No lockers remained, just a long hallway of supply, racks and broken cabinets. But near the rear exit, something caught her eye. A steel panel mounted to the wall, original to the building. Painted over. Chipped. She scraped the paint back. 42. The locker was welded shut. Claire called the museum's lead contractor and asked for a metal cutter. Within the hour, the lock was off. Inside were only 3 items: a moldy leather pouch, a folded blueprint, and a small journal. She opened the pouch first. Inside were 2 ID cards. One said, James Vance. The other, E. Lambert. And under it, Department of Civil Transport. Black manifest unit. She had never heard of such a department. She opened the journal next. Its cover read, Black Manifest number 179MN X4017, Helena Route. Claire flipped to the manifest page. It listed the contents of the shipment her grandfather had mentioned. Crate A, cold containment, biological. Crate B, legacy film reels, classified. Crate C, unlabeled, sealed by order of OS. Crate D, religious artifacts, non-cataloged. D, marked with transfer only, not to be documented. At the bottom, one line, escorted by E. Lambert and J. Vance, sealed the 12th of March 70. Claire stared at the date. The night he vanished. Night the fire happened. And now, it looked like her grandfather hadn't died in a house fire at all. He'd hidden in a train car with whatever was in those crates, and tried to warn someone before he was buried in silence. That night, Claire sat in the back of MNX 4017, staring at the wall where she'd found his message. She laid the ledger in her lap. Then the manifest. She looked at the names again. E. Lambert. The other escort. Why hadn't anyone looked for him? She opened her laptop. Typed his name. There's only one hit. An obituary from 1995. Ellis Lambert. Age 71. Died peacefully. Retired rail inspector. Same name. Same department. No surviving family. No photo, but the article said one thing that stood out. Known for his detailed journals, which were donated to the Great Falls Railway Museum in 1996. Claire's heart skipped. That museum was just 2 hours away, and it might be holding the rest of the story. Claire reached the Great Falls Railway Museum just before noon the next day. It was small. Just a 2-room exhibit in the back of a repurposed town hall building, mostly photos, uniforms, and model trains. The parking lot was cracked. The sign sun faded. But she wasn't here for the decor. She walked straight to the front desk, introduced herself, and asked the curator a question she didn't fully expect to say aloud. Do you have the journals of an Ellis Lambert? Donated around 1996. The older woman behind the counter didn't blink. You're the second person to ask me that in 2 weeks. Claire froze. Who else asked? The woman squinted. Some man. Late 50s maybe. Wore a blue jacket. Had a limp. Said he was writing a book. Didn't leave a name. Claire's pulse quickened. Did he see the journals? The woman shook her head. They're not on display. We keep them in the back archives. I told him we don't allow public access without paperwork. Claire showed her ID and the scanned pages from the ledger and manifest. The woman scanned them carefully, then sighed. Follow me. The archive room smelled like old wood and paper. It was dimly lit, with filing cabinets and storage boxes stacked in labeled rows. The woman opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder. Lambert's journals are handwritten, about a dozen of them. Mostly rail logs and weather observations, but there's one different. She handed it to Claire, a small black book. Inside the cover, in faint pencil, E.L. Black Manifest Reflections, Do Not File. Claire sat down at a nearby table, heart in her throat, and began to read. April 1969. They reassigned me again, this time under OSI orders. No details. Just a train number. MNX4017. Escort duty with J. Vance. He doesn't know the full manifest. Neither do I. May 1969. Crate B is vibrating. Every time we pass through cold air, it emits a high-pitched hum. I reported it. They said log it and stay silent. July 1969. Vance asked questions today. He's smart. He knows something's wrong. I like him. Honest, steady hands. Doesn't deserve to be part of this. December 1969. Received direct order. If cargo compromised, destroy train car. Fire damage acceptable. Recovery not necessary. Claire blinked. Destroy the car? Was that the fire her grandfather had been blamed for? She kept reading. March 11, 1970. Vance found the ledger. He knows. I told him to get out. He said he needed to warn his wife. Said if anything happened to him, someone had to tell Claire. Claire froze. There it was again. Her name in a journal written 23 years before she was born. She kept going. March 12, 1970. Final entry. Vance is gone. Locked himself in MNX 4017. I sealed the rear door under OSI protocol and falsified the report. They think he died in the fire. I pray this ends here. I never wanted this. That was it. No more pages. Just a blank space. Claire closed the journal slowly. The man had faked her. Grandfather's death. To protect him. Or maybe to protect something else. She turned to the museum curator. Can I take this? The woman hesitated, then shook her head. I can give you a copy. But the original stays here. Claire nodded. Then I'll take every copy you've got. That night, back at her motel, Claire laid the two journals side by side, her grandfather's and Lambert's, one written by a man trying to escape something, the other by a man trying to bury it. Together, they told a story that never made it to any official report. A train car sealed on purpose, a cargo shipment no one was supposed to see. And two men who tried, in their own ways, to leave behind enough for someone else to understand. Claire turned her attention back to the ledger's crate descriptions. One in particular still bothered her. Crate C, unlabeled, sealed by order of O.S. It was the only one with no content listing, whatever it was. Her grandfather had locked himself inside with it. She called her father again. This time, she didn't ask questions. She told him what she found: the journals, the train car, the manifest. The handwriting, the date, and the message carved into the floor. Tell Claire. There was a long pause, then a soft inhale. Your grandfather knew your name, her father said. Even back then, Claire blinked. What do you mean? I never told anyone, not even your mother. But when you were born, I didn't choose your name. I opened an old box he left behind, and there was a letter. Dated 1967, it said, if you ever have a daughter, name her Claire. He swallowed. I thought it was sentimental. A joke. I didn't think it meant anything. Claire was speechless. She ended the call and stared at the ceiling in silence. Her grandfather had known her name years before her birth, had left a message in a train sealed in 1970, had asked someone to protect her. And now, 55 years later, she was finally uncovering why. The next morning, she returned to the museum to ask about the legacy film reels listed in crate B. The curator's assistant, a younger guy with an interest in reel-to-reel, said they had a film storage freezer in the back, though most reels were donated anonymously and unmarked. Claire followed him to the unit. Inside were metal canisters, labeled only by number. She asked if one could be labeled HEMH. He checked a clipboard. Only one matches those initials. Canister HEM04. He handed it to her. I wouldn't watch it alone, he said. That one creeps me out. Claire booked a screening room that evening in the archive. Library. The lights dimmed. The reel clicked on. And for the first minute, nothing but static. Then flickering frames. A corridor. Not from a house, from a train. A timestamp appeared. March 12, 1970, 3:19 a.m. The footage was grainy, handheld. The person holding the camera moved slowly through the passenger car. And then it turned toward the emergency exit, toward the rear of MNX 4017, and standing there, facing the camera, was James Vance. Her grandfather. Alive. Awake. Looking straight into the lens, he raised his hand and mouthed something. Claire hit pause. REWOUND. Played it again. Slower. 4 words. It wasn't an accident. The projector hummed faintly as the reel spun back into motion. Claire sat still, her eyes locked on the flickering black and white image of the man she had only ever seen in faded photographs, now alive in motion, standing in a dark train car over half a century ago. Her grandfather. The timestamp on the bottom corner read 3:19 a.m., the 12th of March 1970. After mouthing, it wasn't an accident, he lowered his hand and turned the camera to face something else. Claire leaned forward as the camera panned across the train car, stopping at a row of wooden crates, massive, unmarked, each sealed with reinforced steel bands. He approached. Crate C. The one without a label. James Vance set the camera on a crate opposite it. He looked directly into the lens, his expression tired but determined, and opened a small metal lockbox attached to the side of the crate. He pulled out what looked like a syringe and a folded sheet of paper. The note had the word "Prepare" written in thick black marker across the top. The camera zoomed in, shakily, and caught glimpses of text on the page. Use only in case of breach. Do not inhale the vapor. If signs appear, contain within sealed unit. Burn instructions. Void if car sealed from outside. Claire's breath caught in her chest. He knew something might escape. He was preparing for it. And he didn't trust the burn instructions. Back in the footage, her grandfather moved again. He reached for the metal latch on crate C. Hesitated. Then turned to the camera one last time and said, clearly, if this film is found, Claire, you were always meant to find it. I don't know how, but I know you will. And I'm sorry. He opened the latch. The footage distorted instantly, like the film was reacting to something in the air. Flickering, warping. Claire saw a burst of white light, not flame, more like a flash from inside the crate. The camera tipped sideways. A loud bang echoed in the room. Then the screen cut to static. Claire sat frozen for several minutes, the last frame of static still buzzing on the screen. In the silence, she could hear her own heart beating. She slowly stood, turned off the projector, and rewound the reel. There was no doubt now. Her grandfather had known, had expected her to follow the trail, and he had sealed himself in that train car, not to escape, but to contain something. But what? What had been inside crate C? She drove back to the original MNX 4017 train car that night. The site was still closed to the public. But she had the keys, and more than that, a reason. The old freight car groaned as she pulled open the side door. The smell of rust and oil was thicker now. She stepped inside and sat in the same corner she had on day one, her flashlight sweeping across the wall. She ran her hand along the metal floor near where his message was carved. That's when her fingers caught something, a bolt. Slightly loose. She twisted it. It popped free. Beneath it, a false panel. Claire lifted it slowly, revealing a hollow compartment about 2 feet deep. Inside was a folded cloth, and under it, a small steel canister. She pulled the canister out with trembling hands. It was marked with faded letters, OSI HEM 179 share. Mind raced. This was it. Crate C had been opened. Its contents had been moved. This was all that remained. She turned the canister over. There was a dial, and a note taped to the bottom. Pressurization required for full seal. Do not open under atmospheric conditions. Deliver to deep storage. Unit 7B, Crown Hill Facility. She'd never heard of that place. She took a photo and emailed it to Dr. Holloway. The professor called 2 hours later. I know what that is, she said, her voice grave. Crown Hill was a classified biosafety lab during the Cold War, shut down in the 80s. Some say it was used for early biological testing, others for research on recovered materials. Claire's skin went cold. Recovered materials like what? Dr. Holloway paused. Like things they didn't expect to survive. Claire didn't sleep that night. She sat in the train car, the canister beside her, staring at the dark corners of the space, wondering if something had once leaked from that metal shell and filled this room. Wondering how her grandfather had survived in here for even a few hours, and why the only message he'd left behind, etched in metal, was about her. Tell Claire, not fire. By morning, Claire made a decision that she would visit Crown Hill, even if it was abandoned, even if it was sealed. She had to know what the government had buried, and what her grandfather had risked everything to hide. It took 3 days of digging to find the location. A decommissioned facility in northern Idaho, listed on old maps as a weather observation center. But satellite images showed something else. A perimeter fence, 2 sealed dome structures. And 1 visible rail spur running underground. It had been connected to the same freight network as MNX 4017, the same route her grandfather had traveled. Claire packed the canister in a sealed case, brought gloves, a backup phone, and her camera. She drove 6 hours north through winding back roads until she found the overgrown sign, U.S. Department of Infrastructure, Weather Unit 7B. She parked in a clearing, her heart thudding with every step toward the crumbling fence. The front gate was rusted shut. She slipped through a hole in the mesh. The facility loomed ahead, windowless, quiet, forgotten. Except the padlock was new. She crouched, inspecting the latch. Fresh scratches on the lock, body, and faint footprints in the dust. She wasn't the only one who had come here. She circled to the side entrance. The door had been forced open recently. She stepped inside. The interior smelled of damp concrete and old metal. A long corridor stretched ahead, flickering light from broken fixtures guiding her path. Then, a door. Marked Freight Access Rail Archive Level B. She turned the handle and stepped into darkness. Claire's flashlight scanned the space. Train, parts, sealed lockers, steel crates lining the walls, and on the floor, boot prints, heading toward a stairwell marked B2, Containment. She followed, her pulse now a drumbeat in her ears. At the bottom of the stairs was a large metal hatch. Unmarked. But beside it, a clipboard with one line written in red pen, Vance's. Girl is looking. She'll come here. If she finds the rest, we're done. Claire took a step back. Whoever had been here, they were watching her. Or had been. She turned quickly, ready to leave. But then she saw it. On the opposite wall, scratched into the paint, almost invisible in the low light. Help her finish it. JV. Her grandfather had been here. Or someone pretending to be him. Either way, the truth was closer than ever. And someone else knew she was looking. The silence in the Crown Hill facility felt almost engineered, not just abandoned, but deliberately emptied. Claire stood still in the B2 stairwell, staring at the thick metal hatch ahead. It had no labels, no handles, just the faint outline of a keyhole and a small cracked keypad with a flickering red light. She knew two things. Someone had accessed this place recently. Her grandfather, or someone using his name, had left her a message here. She took out her phone and snapped photos of everything: the door, the clipboard note, the scratch on the wall. Then she kneeled in front of the hatch and examined the keypad more closely. 5 digits. No. TOUCHSCRE. Just buttons worn from decades of use. She hesitated, then punched in a number that had been following her since the beginning. 031270, the date her grandfather had disappeared. The red light blinked, then stayed red. She tried 121,869, the date from his last known journal. Nothing. She looked down at the clipboard again. The ink wasn't faded, like the rest. Whoever wrote it had been here recently. Watching her, Claire reached into her pocket and pulled out the small steel canister recovered from the train. Maybe this was the final piece. She turned it over. There, beneath the faded government seal, were 6 etched digits. 547,930. She typed it in. The keypad let out a soft click. The red light turned green. The hatch creaked, and the door opened. Beyond it was a short corridor, steel walls, floor grates, exposed pipes dripping condensation. At the end, a circular chamber with a central table. Claire stepped forward slowly, heart pounding. As the light from her flashlight swung across the room, she saw something that stopped her cold. Chair. Old, padded, straps on the arms, and a nameplate on the back wall. Subject: James Vance. Status: inactive, transferred to deep. Her stomach turned. They hadn't just watched him, they had studied him. She moved closer to the table. Folder lay open, covered in plastic. Inside were photographs, black and white, time-stamped. All from the 1970s. All of the same man, her grandfather, sitting in that same chair. Wires taped to his head, tubes attached to his veins. His face looked exhausted, but not broken. On one of the pages, someone had written in the corner, "Subject displays anomalous recall." Next to it, circled in red, "Claims granddaughter exists. Born 1989. Data unverifiable." Claire froze. 1989. They had documented his claim of her existence. Before she was born, she sat on the edge of the table, suddenly dizzy. Was he being held here because of her? Was that why he vanished? Why the train car was sealed? Because he knew something about time or memory or something they were trying to extract. A faint hum began to vibrate beneath her feet. She looked around. The door was closing. The keypad flickered red again, now from the inside. Panic surged through her. She jumped up and rushed to the hatch. Lock, trap. She took a deep breath and scanned the room again. On the wall near the chair, a small sliding panel. She pulled it open. Inside, a monitor. It flickered to life on its own. Static. Then, a countdown. 3 o'clock, 2:59, 2:58. A mechanical voice echoed through the room. System purge initiated. Please evacuate. Claire backed away, heart racing. She grabbed her phone, filmed everything, and scanned the room for another exit. Then she saw it, in the floor near the chair, partly concealed under a rubber mat. A small metal door. She yanked it open. Below, a ladder into darkness. No time to think. She climbed down. The shaft was narrow and reeked of mold. Claire descended 30 feet before the air widened into a tunnel. Concrete, cold, lined with decades-old wiring and rusted emergency lights. She followed it. After what felt like a full mile, she reached a set of double doors. They were sealed tight, but next to them was a manual crank. She turned it. It groaned violently, and finally the doors wheezed open. Behind them, another room, and inside it, Claire's breath caught in her throat. A train car, intact, mounted on rails inside a concrete vault. It was an MNX 4017. This one was labeled VXR9, and it was surrounded by observation glass, recording equipment, and an old control console. As she stepped forward, she noticed the writing on the side of the train. Sector, Deep Storage Event Containment Unit. It looked untouched since the Cold War. She walked around to the side window. Inside the train car was a sealed room. Inside that, a body. A man, pale, older, lying on a cot. Wires still attached. An oxygen mask strapped over his face. A faded jacket folded on the chair beside him. Claire's heart dropped. It was the same jacket from the photograph her grandmother had kept. One her father wore for years after. She stumbled back. It was him. Her grandfather. Still here. Still alive? She searched the control console nearby. A tape deck. A speaker system. A blinking light marked live feed. She pressed play. A distorted voice filled the air. If you're hearing this. Then the loop failed. I was supposed to wake in 2005. The girl, Claire, should have been 16. The system delayed. I'm still here. They didn't let me go. Claire's eyes filled with tears. It was his voice. Raspy, tired, but him. Tell her I'm sorry. I tried to stop them. But they kept sending signals back. They needed to know if memory could echo, if blood could remember things, before they happen. She leaned closer. She understand. She always does. Just like her name, I told her father, call her Claire. He never asked why. The tape clicked off. And then the body inside the train car moved. Claire screamed. She backed into the wall. Man stirred, slowly, eyes blinking open. They locked onto her through the glass. She didn't move, didn't speak, until he raised one weak hand and pointed to the speaker beside her, then mouthed 2 words, play it. She rewound the tape, pressed play again. This time, the screen beside the console turned on. Footage from inside the sealed train room. A woman stood next to the cot. Her grandmother, a version of her from decades ago, early 40s maybe, wrinkled. Blouse, eyes red from crying. She leaned down and kissed his forehead. If you wake up and she's grown, tell her the truth. You didn't leave us. You were taken. The screen blinked out. Claire stood still. Every question she'd carried since childhood, every silence at family dinners, every denial from her father. It was all unraveling now. He hadn't abandoned them. He had been buried alive, beneath a military lie, for her. Claire didn't know how long she stood there, staring through the glass at the man in the sealed chamber. The man everyone said had died in 1970, but he was breathing, thin and aged, barely able to lift his hand, but alive. The name tag on his cot confirmed what her heart already knew. James Viancier, grandfather, her father's father, and he had been right here beneath Idaho for the past 55 years, not buried, not burned, preserved. She pressed the intercom button again. The old speaker crackled, then faded. She tried shouting through the glass, but the chamber was soundproof. There had to be a way in. She checked the control panel. Sequence of switches marked airflow, pressure lock, decontamination, entry RELESE needed to be activated in precise order. There were warning labels on all sides. Subject under temporal sedation. Do not breach without containment. Suit. Exposure risk, psychological displacement, auditory hallucinations, disorientation. Consult memory loop manual before unlocking chamber. Claire paused at that phrase. Memory loop. It had come up before, in Dr. Holloway's notes, in her grandfather's video, in the sealed train log. Now, it was printed on government-grade steel, warning her not to proceed. She flipped the first switch anyway. A faint hiss filled the room as air began to cycle into the chamber. Her grandfather blinked, slower now. He seemed to drift in and out of consciousness, but every time he opened his eyes, he looked directly at her. The second switch clicked into place. Pressure lock. Stabile. Claire held her breath as the third switch slid down. Decontamination. In progress, a fog filled the sealed chamber, clouding the glass. Lights flickered inside. Then a loud metallic chime rang out. Entry release. A REMG. Hesitated. Her hand hovered over the final switch. Was she really about to open a door sealed by military scientists during the Cold War? A door that had kept her grandfather locked away for over 5 decades? She looked up. He mouthed it again. Play it. Claire stepped back to the console and checked the video reel archives. Only one file remained. Loop_initiate_ the 3rd of December 1970. She pressed play. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a recording. Inside the train chamber, in the past, James sat with a government official in a suit, flanked by 2 military personnel. A digital date display behind them read, December 3, 1970, Crown Hill facility. Subject claims to have knowledge of future events, the officer said. Describe the incident in 1992. James spoke calmly. The tunnel collapse, 23 dead, caused trace to corroded bearings. I saw the headlines in a dream. You'll find them buried in train car logs from 1993. You won't believe me now. You will later. What about the child? The officer asked. My granddaughter, Claire. She be born in 1989. You'll keep me under until she's old enough to find me. That's what you'll try to do. Claire's jaw tightened. He had described her before she existed. The video kept playing. The loop doesn't just affect memory, her grandfather said. It rewrites instinct. You've been testing it on me since March, haven't you? You consented to experimental containment, the officer snapped. I consented to keep her safe. Who is her? The only person who remembers. Who I really am. Claire's hand moved on its own. She flipped the final switch. A warning siren blared. Chamber opening. Please stand clear. The glass slid open. Cold air rushed out. And then, silence. Claire stepped into the chamber, her boots echoing softly. The air was thick, metallic. But manageable. She approached the cot slowly, her eyes locked on the man she had never truly met. His eyes fluttered open one more time. Claire knelt down, took his hand and whispered, Grandpa? He blinked, focused, then smiled faintly. You found the door. He coughed hard, and she held a cloth to his lips. His voice was frail, but his words were clear. I didn't know if it would work. They changed the locks after '89. They said the loop was too dangerous. What loop? She whispered. The memory loop. Not time travel. Just ... echoes, patterns. I remembered you before you were born. Claire felt her breath catch. How? He pointed to his chest weakly. Blood. Remembers, especially in old steel, trains ... Hold everything. He motioned toward the canister she had brought, the one from MNX 4017. Did you bring it? She nodded. Good, he wheezed. They'll try to stop you now, once you open the chamber. The system alerts whoever's still watching. Claire helped him sit up slowly. His legs trembled beneath him, but he stood, leaning heavily on her. He looked around the chamber and whispered, This was my tomb, until you cracked it. Who kept you here? Not just one person. It was a program called Orion Trace, top secret. Claire froze. She'd seen that name ... It was scribbled in the corner of the notebook she'd found back in the train, right next to his handwriting. He continued, They used me to test for generational memory. The kind that jumps bloodlines. I kept seeing flashes. Things I shouldn't have known, so they put me under. They said I was dangerous. Dangerous? Because I remembered things from the wrong decade. Claire led him to the hallway slowly, behind them. The chamber began to seal itself again, automatically. He stumbled, and she steadied him. We have to get to the surface, she said. Now, he nodded. There's another way up. Under the archive hall. I mapped it in my head 1,000 times. As they moved through the facility, Claire began noticing new things. Cameras, some broken, some blinking, red lights following them. She clutched her phone. If someone was watching, they would know now. They would know he was awake, that she'd freed him, and they might come to stop her. They reached the base of the old stairwell. He paused. If I don't make it out, you tell them, he said. Tell who? Everyone. That the loop exists. That memory ... doesn't need time to travel. I don't understand. You will. When you start dreaming things that haven't happened yet. She stared at him, stunned. It runs in us, he added softly. Just like the name. Claire means clear. You always saw clearer than the rest. He looked up the stairs and whispered, Go first. If they come for us, you run. Don't let them seal you like they did me. They ascended, slowly ... step by step. When they reached the final steel door to the surface, they heard voices ... outside ... not police ... not rescue, but military tone ... radios ... a man shouting, Make sure the perimeter's clear. We need to retrieve the subject intact. Claire turned to her grandfather. He just nodded once. Now it starts. Claire pressed her back against the stairwell wall, her grandfather leaning against her shoulder. Just beyond the steel door above, the sound of boots thudding across gravel echoed like thunder. She looked up, whispered, They're here. Nodded, his face pale and damp. We need another way out. That door leads to them, not freedom. Claire helped him back down the stairs. His legs were failing. Decades in near stasis had left his body barely functional. They descended past the maintenance tunnel, where she'd first entered the deeper corridor. At the base, the hallway split left and right. James turned to her. Eyes clear for a brief moment. Left leads to the archive bay. Right is the backup generator. Which way? Left. There's a door, locked for years, but if it's still wired like before. They hobbled left. The air changed. No longer metallic and cold. It was stale, still dry. They entered. A vast room filled with rusting file cabinets, reel-to-reel recorders, boxes of yellowing microfiche. Everything coated in dust thick as carpet. And in the center of it all, a phone booth-sized steel elevator shaft. James slumped against the wall. Beside it, Up through that. Emergency access to the chapel foundation. Claire moved fast. She scanned the console beside the shaft. No power, but near it, buried under plastic sheeting, was an old battery crank unit, hand-powered. She locked it into place, started cranking. Each turn whined and clanked, shaking the floor slightly. Behind her, James murmured something she barely heard. It always ends in the chapel. The elevator door opened. Claire helped her grandfather inside. She cranked it again, slower this time. The motor struggling. The doors shut. A deep rumble began. She backed away from the panel, but didn't climb in. James blinked at her. "What are you doing?" "You go. I'll distract them." "No, Claire, no. You said they'd stop me. They'll stop you too." She stepped forward, pressed her hand to the glass panel between them. "I just need to lead them off. They won't shoot me. I'll make them listen." His voice cracked. "I waited 55 years to see your face." She smiled. "Now you'll get to tell them what you saw." The elevator rose slowly, rattling upward toward daylight. Claire turned and ran. Back down the tunnel. Boots were already echoing from the east entrance. She charged toward the first door she'd opened, the one with the keypad. She paused, then slammed the hatch shut behind her. It clicked. Locked. She crouched in the shadows of the stairwell and waited. Seconds later, two men in tactical gear burst through the far entrance. One of them stopped near the sealed hatch and tapped his radio. "Chamber compromised. Subject may be mobile." "Locate the girl," said a voice through the static. "Copy. Moving to secondary tunnels." They didn't notice Claire, not yet. She waited until they passed, then slipped silently through another side hall. Back to the collapsed hallway, near the train car she'd entered originally. And then light, when she emerged into the forest clearing behind Crown Hill facility. It was dusk. A chill breeze blew through the trees. But something was different. The van she'd arrived in was gone, and a new vehicle, dark green, government plates, was parked beside the entry fence. Claire knew she had maybe minutes. She slipped through the trees, crouched behind a stump, and pulled out her phone. She uploaded everything. The photos. The videos. The voice recordings. The clips from the console. She sent them to every reporter's inbox she could find in her contact list, even old classmates who wrote for regional news blogs. Then she posted the folder to her social media, tagging everything. #Crown Hill Loop, #James Vance, #Project Orion Trace. She added a caption. "They said he died in 1970. He didn't. They buried him beneath Idaho and lied to all of us. My name is Claire Vance. He's my grandfather. And the truth has waited long enough." She hit post. Then ran. 2 weeks later, her story was everywhere. At first, mainstream news ignored it, dismissed it as a hoax. But the footage from inside the train car was too detailed. The body, the audio, the handwriting. And then, a whistleblower came forward, a former government archivist who had worked at Crown Hill in the 1990s. He confirmed everything. Crown Hill was a psychological containment site. Memory loop experiments began in 1969 under Project Orion Trace, an attempt to study precognitive recall in trauma survivors. Claire's grandfather had been their first long-term subject. He had shown signs of dreaming future events. Rather than release him, they preserved him. In secret for decades. In the months that followed, Congress opened an inquiry. Claire testified before a closed committee. Her grandfather, James Vance, was moved to a civilian hospital under protection. Doctors said he had early signs of cognitive fading, but his mind was intact. And more than that, he began predicting things again. A landslide in Colorado, a political resignation, a child found alive in a missing persons case. No one could explain it, but he wasn't guessing. Claire moved back to her childhood home. She took a leave from her research fellowship, choosing instead to document the experience. She started a blog, The Memory Loop Diaries. Her first post went viral, but her final lines were quiet. If the past can echo forward, maybe love does too. Maybe memory isn't just what we hold. Maybe it's what holds us. He remembered me before I existed, and I remembered him long after he vanished. Now we both remember together. She thought he died before she was born, but he remembered her 55 years before they met. Now the world finally knows the truth he never stopped trying to tell.